consideration.
Let's take it in here.
Okay. So, Speaker, it's a very difficult time. There's a serious disorganization in the work of Parliament, in a qualitative consideration of annual performance plans by the executive as well as the budgets. I will just limit myself to 2 points in that regard. One is most of the documentation, which, as you are aware, is extremely extensive. Figures in the budget, figures in relation to programs and performances, and the qualitative facts. Members receive documents in the meeting or receive documents the night before. And then the committees are forced to sit, in most of the cases, for 2 hours to consider extensive entities. This is new. Over 50% of our members now in this parliament are new. The executive has an unfair advantage. In essence, we are being steamrolled to just rubber stamp. There's no interrogation, and it cannot take place under those conditions. That's the first point. There's no single committee where members received documents at least 48 hours before, so that when a claim is made by, for instance, the Commissioner of the Police in a document that they're going to present, one is able to go and verify it and check it, whether indeed they achieved a certain program for which they are asking a reallocation of funds. And then the second point is the disorganization of venues. You will be sitting in here and the executive presents, actually in one committee, I think it's arts and culture, if I'm not mistaken. The entities were asked to present 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes. And then after 2 hours, there was no conversation. The committee had to stop, and because another committee was coming in. It's extremely bad in the portfolio committees. And then in some instances, only chairpersons were elected. In some instances, committees collapsed because of quorum. Some of them basically couldn't even elect a chairperson. There's not been qualitative parliamentary work over the last 2 days. Now, we tried to, as you know, the process in Parliament, Speaker, is a broad consultation of the chief whips and all of that, so that we don't come and display these differences here. We understand and appreciate that the budget process has to conclude end of July. We were disadvantaged, firstly, by the late announcement of the executive for the constitution of portfolio committees, which took 3 weeks since the election of the president. And you said that when you dismissed us in the first sitting. You said to the president, congratulations, I hope you make the executive announcement soon so that we are able to commence the following week with the program of Parliament. It didn't happen. We're disadvantaged. But now we're just being steamrolled just to get it over and done. There's no Parliament work. And I don't think you want that under your leadership. And if you check, we can all exchange notes, but there's very little work that is happening qualitatively. And the last point is, remember, the executive and the entities present annual performance plans, they present budgets. And then the committee must have an opportunity to meet for the second time to consider its own report. But these committees are sitting once, and they are debating today. What are they debating? We are just basically scripted. It's a drama, it's a show. I don't think the constitutional duty is being properly executed. And I really would consider, appeal to your consideration that in the next item we must radically revise the program. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Honourable Member Ndlozi. Let me indicate that indeed yesterday one did receive the report of the discussion in the whippery. And we reflected on it, but also considered some of the options that were being made. And unfortunately, as you know, that there are particular timelines we have to meet in the approval of the budget. And it's not only the National Assembly that has to consider it, it also has to factor in the National Council of Provinces. And in looking at what is possible, you will see that some of the committees indeed are not going to be able to sit today or tomorrow. We will try and squeeze them next week. But those committees whom we consulted who felt they were ready, it's those that were able to engage and put them up for presentation of their budgets today and tomorrow. And I must say that all of us do appreciate that we're not in a space where we would all have liked to be in terms of the timelines, particularly of the reasons that you yourself have articulated about when the committees were finally reconstituted, which is not ideal of what we would have liked. But the unfortunate part is that with respect to the timelines on when we need to approve the budget, there is very limited space. We do, however, hope that those committees who are not sitting today or tomorrow in terms of presenting their budgets for discussion, they'll have enough time to be able to go through the presentation. Obviously, as you say, those that are debating today and tomorrow might not have had enough opportunity to do the examination of their budgets as we would have liked, ideally, in the normal course of things. And I would, therefore, appeal to members that we proceed, particularly that those members we consulted, the chairpersons as well as the ministers who are supposed to present the budget, and all of them felt they are ready to proceed. We have received the reports. Let me hear Honourable Shivambu.
No, thank you, Speaker. The most unfortunate reality is that we had a very long discussion yesterday in the Chief Whips Forum, which obviously is a closed meeting. And we reached unanimity, all of us, as Chief Whips and in the presence of the National Assembly Secretary, in the presence of the staff that deal with programming, that the manner in which the processes of budgeting and committee processes have happened thus far is not satisfactory. And we reached unanimity that we should postpone the budget votes for today and tomorrow to allow the committees to exhaust the deliberations and compile reports that are going to be presented in the budget votes for approval purposes. All of us agreed, and we then had mandated, of course, those who convened the Chief Whips Forum that they should communicate that and get that to be in process so that we prepare our members accordingly to have meaningful participation in the budgeting process. And for some strange reason, and a phenomenon which must be avoided, particularly by the Chief Whip of the ANC, is that when we agree on something and we mandate you to go and do it, when you have not succeeded, you must come back to us and tell us that you have not succeeded in what we have mandated you to do. It's for the second time now that we say please go and consult on this issue, and then if there's no decision, come back to us. Don't shock us with the communication that we're proceeding, as if this process that we engage in of programming doesn't matter. It's unprofessional. It's extremely unacceptable. It's not parliamentary in terms of how the traditions and conventions have been thus far. It's unfortunate we have to raise it here because we raised it in the Chiefs Forum that if we agree on something, like it's for the first time we've been in this process, like fortunately or unfortunately, some of us for over 10 years now. It's for the first time where an agreement in the Chiefs Forum gets changed and no one even says anything. Like it's as if it doesn't matter, like it don't matter in terms of what we've agreed upon. We had due consideration of all these aspects that you are giving yesterday, and then we even went to the extent that let's even consider the deferment or postponement of the opening of Parliament as requested by the President, so that we exhaust the budgeting process on the 16th, 17th, 18th, and all those days that had been allocated, because once there's opening of Parliament, there must be debate of that opening address that will be given by a president, which eats into the time which was going to be dedicated to an otherwise legislatively and constitutionally compulsory process of budgeting, because whatever is a budget must be laws that are passed by this Parliament, and that is urgent. That we discussed and found unanimity. There was no one who disagreed in the Chief Whips Forum yesterday. And to then just steamroll us again without even have the courtesy of coming back to us, it's unacceptable in terms of how this process has been handled thus far. And it must never happen again where we agree on something, and when a different decision is taken, there is no courtesy to communicate that we cannot proceed as agreed. It's unacceptable. And that is not how Parliament is. It won't lead to a proper functioning of Parliament, because thus far the process has not been satisfactory, has not been exhaustive, and has not been even fully legally compliant in terms of the budgeting process, because it has just been steamrolling, and members have not been given adequate opportunity to reflect on the budgets and the APPs as to what should be approved as the amounts of money which are going to be expended by the executive. That is our major concern that we're raising. But of course, we're going to raise it again when we come to programming as to how we think it should appear on the program of Parliament moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, for that reflection. I would ask Honourable Ntuli.
No, thanks a lot, Madam Speaker. Firstly, I want to confirm that in our discussion yesterday, a number of concerns were raised about the pace at which the process has been handled. That we needed to elevate the concerns and our own observations as reported to us by various members who sit in the committees. That if there is a way in which we can shift some of the meetings that were scheduled for today, tomorrow to next week, that should be one of the considerations that we make. But it was not only that. We also agreed that, including by the indications which were made in this meeting of the Chief Whips Forum by other members, that we're not going to use a blanket approach. We've got to be as pragmatic as possible and avoid a situation where our approach is blanket and results into a chaos. We are all committed to ensure that the work of Parliament is done in a way that is consistent with what is expected from the political parties and members of the National Assembly. I want to give an example that there were committees where we were informed yesterday. Example of that is the minerals and petroleum, that the committee had a meeting for 3 hours to conduct its business. And therefore, there would be no justification whatsoever for us to come to a blanket approach that everything that has happened yesterday or the day before yesterday was a steamrolling of the process, as other members have characterized it. Secondly, we also agreed that as the Whips Forum, we don't determine the program of the committees once they are elected and properly constituted. And we've got to respect that. Otherwise, if we are going to assign and appropriate to ourselves responsibilities that are not defined by the law, we are going to run into a major crisis. That is why we left it to you, Speaker. We agreed that we are going to raise these concerns with your office, which we did. But we also understood, even at that meeting, that the finalization of what happens today, tomorrow, and next week would be subject to your office interacting with the various portfolio committees to ascertain their state of readiness for today and tomorrow. And you have done that job. You've interacted with them, and the portfolio committee chairpersons, as per the indication that was presented here, confirmed that they were ready and prepared to go ahead. So I don't think that is appropriate for us to say, and again, I want to caution against this tendency of generalizing. Let's be specific. If there is a valid and a major concern about a particular portfolio committee that this committee did not do its work properly, let's deal with that. There's no problem with that. But I don't think that we should generalize and create a crisis that we are not following the law and we are just working on the basis of what we are deciding to do without allowing sufficient time for committees to process their work. The last 2 points that I want to mention is that we agreed in the meeting yesterday, Honorable Speaker, that in an event where the processes are shifted to next week, because there were various suggestions and a consensus or agreement that we reached, was that if the determination is that there are committees which are not ready today and tomorrow, let's shift everything to next week. And when we shift everything to next week in terms of what was going to happen today and tomorrow, we even consider a possibility of starting early as 8 o'clock and using some of the weekends. That was one of the avenues that in our meeting we considered. But we understood then, and I still think we should be understanding even now, that recommendation of our forum was subject to an exercise that as a forum we were not in a position to do and determine who is ready and who is not ready the following day. Because that's not our job to determine the readiness. It's the job of the Office of the Speaker. We didn't even want to venture into that. So my point is that I've not heard that the committees which are set up for tomorrow and Friday are raising concerns that they are unprepared. And if my understanding is correct, therefore, Madam Speaker, I don't think that we should generalize and say we must move away all the meetings because we are steamrolled, we are not following the legislation, and that we've got a problem. So I want to appeal to the meeting that let's deal with the matters case by case. If we are honest and genuine about dealing with a problem where there might be a lack of readiness on this or the other committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable members, there's a member at the back that I've...
No, thanks, Speaker. One must first apologize for arriving late. I think the Speaker will be aware that there's a lot happening outside. The weather is very bad. No, Speaker, I am Ngobim Sazana. I'm coming from the MK party. The Chief Whip had indicated to us as well as my fellow honorable members from the EFF has alluded to say, it's not just a matter of generalizing, but we represent organizations that represent the poor, and they are saying that they are not ready on the basis that, particularly when it comes to documentation of these bills, or these budget votes. For instance, for higher education and training, we had only gotten documentation the previous day at around 6 in the evening, where the presentation was yesterday. So we haven't had adequate time to scrutinize and study this documentation. So it's a general feeling in the basis that we only got documentation late. Hence, we were requesting that these matters be deferred to next week, not on the basis of generalizing, but on the basis that we need to be prepared so that we can make an input adequately when we are ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mentor.
Nkosi Speaker. No, Speaker, I think, one, we are adopting a very different attitude and approach. An attitude that says we will do as we wish. It doesn't matter how you try to convince us. Whether legally or not legally, you're not in charge, we are in charge. That's the attitude we are confronted with at this point. Number one, we know what are the duties of the Chiefs Forum. It's a consultative forum. It takes no decisions. We can't be reminded of that every time we make a point. We did not take a decision. We consulted each other. We all agreed that this is an approach which makes sense. And therefore, we must then take it to the Speaker for the Speaker to advise. And then come back, tell the same people we have taken a decision with that this is now where we are, and this is the advice of the Speaker. What then confronts us is arrogance of just communicating, we're going ahead, this is what is happening, irrespective of where we were before the decision was taken. But number two, we have a program and a programming committee that must change whatever program which we have consulted each other on. If the Speaker feels that mini plenaries must go ahead and advise as such, it cannot be then forced down our throat without coming to the platform to all agree that, okay, this is now how we're moving, we are now rearranging the program. Yesterday, what happened is that a communication came out, these are the committees that are coming. There was no programming that took place, and no one reminded each other that this is wrong. It ought to have been a programming committee which then deals with this matter and reprogram it as such. Now, the determination of whether these committees are ready or not, it was also in question yesterday. There were members who identified committees that did not sit. Now we are sitting with a question of if anyone, we must not generalize, if anyone can identify a committee which was not ready. When we came here yesterday, we came with complaints of members. One, if I may just identify one committee, minerals. The first person to complain in the EFF to us, to the Chief Whip and myself, was the member of minerals. They couldn't deal with the report thoroughly. When they were asking questions, another committee was literally at the door. And the chairperson told them, there's nothing we can do, we must move. We must get out of this venue, another committee has to come here. And then we are told by the ANC, we had sufficient time to deal with the matter. There was no sufficient time because they elected a chairperson. It took time out of that 2 hours. Then the department presented for more than 30 minutes. When members were engaging the report, they couldn't get responses. They couldn't engage the report. They had to vacate the venue. Then we are told, no, they have adopted a report. They adopted a report drafted on what basis? Because now it's a report of the ANC, a minister of minerals, with the chairperson and the ANC members or the GNU members drafted a report. All that we are left with as opposition is to just say, no, we reject the report. We can't do that. It's illegal. You cannot place budget in front of members and expect them not to engage it, not to get answers, not to satisfy themselves that this is a sufficient budget. Why are we cutting? Why are we adding? Why were certain KPIs not achieved? That was not done at Minerals. It's one of the committees that are here, and we are told today their report has been published. Their report was adopted yesterday. The similar question did rise in the committee. Why are we adopting a report which we did not engage? It was not answered. Simply because the report is adopted, it doesn't matter how the members feel, it doesn't matter how the process was dealt with, is wrong. All these committees can sit this morning, they can adopt the report later. It doesn't mean it was dealt with sufficiently and in a thorough process of budgeting. So that is wrong and it's illegal, Speaker. But the last thing, Speaker, is the issue of the venues which led to this process, as well as the documentation being given to members, was not done on time. Documents were found in the meeting when they were dealing with the matter of electing a chair. They were presented with documents to deal with. It has never happened. You can never effectively be productive in a committee where a document is given to you now. You must engage it now, you must understand the budget now, and you must adopt that report now. And that's what happened to all these committees, which today were told they are ready. Secondly, they did not have sufficient time to deal with this because there was other committees that needed to occupy the space. And that was made very clear, that we can't be engaging forever. You must ask your question and you must leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I've listened to the concerns raised by various members, and as I've indicated earlier, we are not in the ideal space where all of us would have loved to be. And I take the note that what might not have happened before we went ahead with publishing was to go back to the members to say, having noted the issues that were raised in the Chief Whips Forum, these are the considerations we've made, we've consulted, and following that consultation, we feel we can proceed, even though not all committees can proceed today or tomorrow, but those that are ready, we can. And I take the note in that respect. But I also want to indicate that the program in terms of the budget votes that were put were actually agreed to last week. Yes, they might have been re-looked by the whippery, but it's not like it was not agreed to in our last week program committee meeting. And it was on that basis that we felt it is important that those that were ready can continue today and on Friday, because we're not like changing the program that has already been agreed to. So in that respect, I would still appeal to members that we take note also of where we are and try to work within, unfortunately, the situation that is not the most ideal, but in order for us to ensure that we still meaningfully do what we have to do as the legislatures. The House Chairperson on committees will further consult with the various committees going forward in terms of how they work, particularly the chairpersons and their members, to make sure that there is satisfactory work that is done that is acceptable to each and every member of the committee. And I would really appeal to members that we proceed in this regard. We'll now move to the next item on the Bills Office. Who is representing? Who's presenting?
Madam Speaker, there are two reports. The one is on the bills and the other is on constitutional court deadlines. So Dr. Mbata will do bills and Advocate Adhikari will do constitutional court deadlines. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. I will be doing the Bills Office report. Dr. Twalo has already reported on the appropriation bill, which was B5 of 2024. It lapsed at the end of the parliamentary session and it was revived. And this is the only bill that is before Parliament at the moment. But I will also indicate on the next slide, which is bills passed and sent to the President for assent. I'm indicating these bills for honorable members to note the bills that were passed towards the end of the 6th Parliament, which is the number of bills that were passed were 28 and sent to the President for assent. They are still with the President. So they are indicated on slide number 3 and slide number 4. If we move to the next slide, Honorable Speaker, this is a list of bills that were recently assented to. And these bills have been received by Parliament and they have been sent to the Constitutional Court for safekeeping. That's all we have from the Bills Office. I'll hand over to the Chief to continue with the report on Constitutional Court deadlines.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Speaker and honourable members. I'm Suraya Adhikari. For those members who haven't met me yet, Advocate Charmaine van der Merwe, who's the custodian of this portfolio, is unfortunately stuck with trees across the road. So I'm going to try to present her slides. I think what is important for this committee is only one slide, slide 1, which deals with 3 bills that were before the 6th Parliament and that have now lapsed, and it is for consideration. We're recommending now that consideration be given to the revival of these 3 bills. The first one is the Electoral Commission Bill. There's no date for by which this bill must be passed, but based on the court case that was brought by Ms. Weingard in respect of the electoral challenge to the Electoral Commission Act, where there is no provision for a referendum in respect of premiers, because we submitted to the court that we were considering a bill, the court has dismissed the case but left the door open for the applicant to come back. So it is in our best interest to consider the revival of this bill. There is a private member's bill to this effect. A committee bill would be an alternative, but we need to address that. The second one is the Marriages Act. In respect of the Marriages Act, there was a case brought by the Women's Legal Centre Trust, and in that case, both the divorce and marriages aspects were challenged. The Divorce Act was passed, but the Marriages Act, it was decided, would deal more holistically with all marriages, not just what the court order addresses. We have a date there. An extension was recently granted, and the date is June 2026. But I want to caution, it's a very complex matter, and it may sound a long time off, but it is very little time for the complexity of the matter. The third one that we'd like to bring to the attention of this committee is the Immigration Amendment Bill. And there we have a deadline of 29th October 2024. In respect of this bill, there's also a bill that was before the committee, and that lapsed at the end of the 6th Parliament. There are a number of other matters that we are dealing with the department, where the executive is dealing with it, but we'll report on that in due course. On the next slide, which just for purposes of update and mentioning, there are 2 bills awaiting assent that are impacted, and then there are a number of matters that have been recently finalized by the President since our last report. The last line there is the cannabis for private purposes bill, which was assented to recently, I think in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Adhikari and Ms. Mata. There is the report, colleagues. Oh, Honourable Sart, Honourable Ment.
No, Chair, thank you for the report, and I think this is a perennial issue that comes up, and it's important for us at the beginning of this Parliament to understand the challenges when it comes to Constitutional Court deadlines, and I appreciate the mechanism that was put in place in the last Parliament to monitor those deadlines, because it's embarrassing that the Constitutional Court gives the order against Parliament to amend legislation, and then we wait for the executive to bring that legislation, and there's often delays in that regard. Now, one particularly looks at the one, the 29th of October, which is just around the corner, and then often one has to then apply again for an extension and give good reasons for that, and there has been situations in the past where the Constitutional Court has refused to give those extensions. So I just want to emphasize the importance of monitoring these deadlines and ensuring that either the executive is bringing the bills, or where we're faced with, like the 29th of October, the bill lapsed, it needs to be revived, it needs to be urgent attention, or where we faced, sometimes it might be necessary for a committee bill to meet the deadline, as has been done in the past. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable Mentor.
Thank you, Speaker. Yeah, on the bills, we hear of the ones assented and ones that were passed. We haven't been provided with all the bills that the 6th Parliament was dealing with, those that then lapsed with the 6th Parliament, which required to be revived. And we need to have that, because part of them are private member bills that committees were seized with. And we also need guidance as to what would be the time frame which the Bills Office would be looking at in terms of reviving that. And we can ready our members, especially where private member bills are concerned. Then number 2 is what also we have been trying to deal with in the past Parliament, and I think we were interrupted by COVID. The repeal of all the laws of apartheid. The Bills Office was seized with the task of identifying all the apartheid laws, bring them to us, which ones we can quickly deal with and change them. Part of them were the Riotous Acts of 1975, which some of the people in South Africa are still being charged with those laws of apartheid, which we agree under the democratic dispensation should not be utilized. But it's upon us as Parliament to make sure that law is changed, because failure to do that, the charge can only be dealt with and be given to anyone who has committed a crime utilizing what's available. So we have to move with speed in repealing all the apartheid laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any hand? I don't see. The issue of monitoring and tracking, that's one of the issues that has been raised, which I think the Bills Office needs to take on to ensure that, particularly where there are constitutional deadlines, we meet those. But I think generally, all the bills we must just track to see where they are. The other matter relates to those bills that needs revival, and I think the request is to know the time frame. How much time can we assist so that those go back to those committees? And then the last one is picking up on the issue that might have fallen off the crack of the repeal of all the apartheid laws. Advocate Adikari or Mr. Klaus?
Madam Speaker, firstly, will provide a report on the bills that lapsed. But in terms of their revival, I think for private members' bills, it shouldn't be an issue. I think a member would indicate if they want their bill to be revived. But for those that came from the executive, there needs to be a process of consultations with the relevant ministers, whether it is still desirable for the bill to be dealt with by Parliament. And Madam Speaker will be undertaking that process to consult the executive. But for private members' bills, as I indicated, the members could indicate to us when they wish for those bills to be revived, and the House, because it has to be done by House resolution, then the House must revive those bills. Thank you, ma'am. And the other issue of repeal of bills, we will we'll do a report of how far we took that process, because there was a process, a list was drawn up, and there had to be consultations also with the Law Commission, but we'll do a proper report, a comprehensive report on the journey that we undertook at the time and what still needs to be done. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I suggest that maybe we leave this issue on the agenda of the programming until we are resolved with those matters, so that we can get in the next week an indication that these are private members' bill, so that members can resuscitate them if they want. We also get those that come from departments to say this is where we are still consulting with the executive, whether the bill is desirable or not. And also the standing program on where we are on the repeal of apartheid legislation. So we'll retain that on the agenda until we are able to clear those matters. Honourable Frolik.
Honourable Speaker, just to add that I've just briefly had discussions with Advocate Adikari this morning, so that we also look at legislation that was assented to by the President but was struck down by the Constitutional Court due to insufficient public participation or other matters pertaining to Parliament specifically, so that we do get a list of those and then have discussions on how we are going to deal with those matters. Thank you.
Thank you. So all of these matters will be standing items on our agenda until we're able to resolve those. Thank you very much, members. Can we now move to the consideration of our program, which has been circulated to you, Mr. Klassen?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For today, we will be dealing with the health budget vote in the Good Hope Chamber, employment and labor at 2. So there's only one budget vote this morning between 10 and 12. And in the afternoon, employment and labor and Stats South Africa, M46, and vote number 27, Office of the Chief Justice, S12A. And then between 4:30 and 6:30, International Relations and Cooperation vote number 6, the Good Hope Chamber, and Mineral Resources and Energy, M46. Initially, Madam Speaker, we had Science and Technology. That budget vote is going to next week, Wednesday, in the afternoon. We also had, for today, we also had the budget vote on women. It's going to Friday in the afternoon. And human settlements was meant to be done later today, but that budget vote also is going to next week, because those committees are not ready yet. And then for tomorrow, in the morning, we'll do public service and administration. Then we'll do budget vote number 4, government communications and information systems, and vote 41, water and sanitation. I see the time was not indicated, but that will be from 10 o'clock. We'll indicate that. And then in the afternoon, 2 to 4, it's National Treasury, vote 8, and Small Business Development. And then the women, youth, and persons with disabilities, all these chairpersons indicated that they were ready to deal with the budget votes. Madam Speaker, for next week, Monday, yes. So Monday would be a sitting day, the 15th, and those are the budget votes, transport, communications, digital technologies, home affairs for the morning session, afternoon, basic education, planning, monitoring, and evaluation, correctional services, and in the afternoon, late afternoon, it will be forestry, fisheries, and environment, then state security, and defense and military veterans. On state security, we've received all the names for the ad hoc committee, and the intention is for those members to take the oath this afternoon before the speaker, and the committee is set to meet tomorrow to be briefed on the matters before it. Madam Speaker, we can note Tuesday 16th. I don't know if I should go through them again, but police in the morning, agriculture, land reform and rural development, sports, arts and culture, afternoon public enterprises, public works and infrastructure, higher education and training. And then for the late afternoon, we will do trade, industry and competition, tourism, cooperative governance and traditional affairs. Then for Wednesday, the 17th, there will be no budget vote in the morning to allow committees to meet. And part of the reason is that cabinet meets on Wednesdays. So in the afternoon, we then do justice and constitutional development, social development, and late afternoon, we do science and innovation, which would have been done today. We will also do human settlements, also moved from today to next week. On Thursday is the opening address and the debate the next day and resumption of debate. There was a request for the resumption of debate, that is the reply by the President, to be in the morning of Monday the 22nd, but consultations are still happening there with the Presidency. Then in the afternoon, we'll do Parliament's budget vote, both houses, the NA and the NCOP. We'll also be adopting the reports that would have come from committees on budget votes. And then the next day, we will do debate on vote 1, the Presidency, at 2 o'clock. And then Wednesday, we will do reply by the President. And then Thursday, the 25th, we are meant to pass the appropriation bill. And that will be the end for this term. We have circulated the framework, which must be finalized by the Joint Program Committee, which will not meet today. It was meant to meet today, but it's being moved to next week. The date will be confirmed because we are consulting the NCOP for the Joint Program Committee. But the constituency is supposed to be from the 29th of July till the 19th of August, and the period until end of August be dedicated to committees, including training for specific committees. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable members, there is the program. Can I get comments? Honourable Ndlozi.
Thank you, Speaker. Sorry. The proposal for the postponement of the the plenary session, the mini plenary sessions on Thursday and Friday, by the way, came from the NC yesterday. I think as an opening comment, Speaker, there must be an honest process. And the comrades of the NC must just be honest. If they couldn't convince you, they must say, hey, we couldn't convince the Speaker. They must not say, no, we said that the final decision comes from the Speaker. Nobody doesn't know that. We're not kids. We know that. But you were defeated. You couldn't convince the speaker, you come back and say, hey, comrades, we couldn't. Let's conventionalize consultation. Otherwise, the Chief Whip's Forum is a useless body, but must be scrapped from the rules. Consultation makes Parliament work better. The new leadership of the ANC needs to internalize that. It's going to be very difficult to be taken seriously moving forward. So we object, Speaker. And you will see that the steamrolling in this program, the President wants SONA. There's no problem with that. But we're in this situation because of him taking 3 weeks, if not more, to constitute portfolios. Then he still wants to have 3 days to himself with Parliament. And then he comes back for budget vote 1. Again, you allocate him. Budget vote 1, we are debating him again, and then we come back for replies. He takes the lion's share of July. But in your admission, you say we don't have time, there are extreme circumstances, there is a drama of venues, times, and all of that. But you are not reflecting it here. The executive is basically having its day, its field day on Parliament. You are not defending the integrity, the independence, the autonomy of Parliament, Speaker. So we insist, the committee reports, even if they were published last night, the expectation that members will have qualitative debate today is a joke. It's like a joke on holding the executive accountable. You're playing a joke on our people. We should go back to the proposal that we made yesterday and allow committees, if they can have a second opportunity to meet and interrogate those reports. So if a meeting took place, Speaker, yesterday for 2 hours, and there were presentations, there were questions, then there were no answers because there was no time, what will a report say? How can there be a report of the deliberations in the court? There were no deliberations. So we must shift mini plenaries to next week, exhaust this week, today and tomorrow, for committees to conclude their work qualitatively. We must appeal for the postponement of the opening of Parliament to August. He's going to speak on budget vote 1. He must come do those things of poems of SONA in August. This is law. There's nothing in the SONA that needs to be adopted. There are no resolutions. It's just, a symbolic activity. But the executive needs to accept consequences of its own action. Let's allow this week completely to be dedicated to committees, and July to be dedicated to the budgeting process, and then SONA can come